What's going on everyone, it's Justin here, and today I've got the full comparison for you between the HTC M7 and the successor, the M8. Upon the release of the M7, there are definitely a lot of things to like about it. Most of all, the aluminum unibody construction of it, which they have definitely continued on in the M8, but also the ultra pixel camera, HTC taking a different approach as to other manufacturers, but also the fact that these feature the best speakers, hands down, compared to any phone you'll try out, what HTC calls boom sound. So I'll say that the M8 is really trying to build upon a lot of the features that consumers really enjoyed in the M7, but also adding a few along the way. The first category we're going to start out with is the hardware. The M7 was really commended for its aluminum construction, definitely very durable, feels very nice in the hand. Every day when you wake up, you pick it up, you get that nice cold aluminum feel to it, and in the M8 they have definitely wanted to continue that. In fact, it has more metal than it did on the M7. The M7 was 70% metal, and you can see that the side bands were made out of plastic, while the M8 now is 90% metal, and it pretty much wraps all around the edge of the phone, feeling much more seamless, comfortable, and rounded, but at the same time adding a cool streamlined look to it. I definitely think the engineers have done an amazing job with that, as if you know, antenna and wireless bands definitely do not like metal. The M8 is also 0.05mm thicker, and it also weighs in 17 grams heavier at 160 grams as opposed to 143. With the M8, you're also able to upgrade your storage now, allowing you to add up to a 128GB SD card. It ships with 32GB of storage already built in, but it's definitely great to still be able to expand storage onto an external card. And on the bottom, you've got your standard micro USB port for charging and syncing, and you can also see that the headphone jack on the M8 has been moved over to the bottom. And although the design of the M8 does stay reminiscent of the M7, I'm actually a huge fan of the changes they have made in the streamlined and rounded edges. Moving on to the display, you could tell that the M8 is slightly larger, coming in at 5 inches with a 1920 by 1080 resolution display at a 441 ppi, while the M7 has a 4.7 inch display, also full HD resolution at a 469 ppi. Don't even bother minding that ppi count though, as I assure you will not notice any difference. The display is still extremely sharp, vibrant, and beautiful, no problems with that, and although the screen size is slightly larger on the M8, they have now moved the buttons onto the screen, so I guess that does compensate for the size. Next up, let's talk about the software. Both of these phones currently do run Android 4.4 KitKat, and although the M7 did ship with 4.1.2, we're going to be comparing it in its latest software version, and also the HTC Sense 5, comparing it to the Sense 6 UI that is seen on the M8. So first up, we're going to take a look at the M7. It does seem very snappy, as you may expect. It is powered by a Snapdragon 600 processor clocked in at 1.7 GHz. Of course, it is quad core, and it also has 2 GB of RAM. So here's a look at blink feed, something that HTC has really wanted to encourage, I'd like to say, and it is just to the left of the home screen, and a lot of people have chosen to take it off. It is kind of just a version of Flipboard on your home screen, and I'll actually say that the HTC Sense UI is rather simple compared to other skins, for example TouchWiz. It still gives you all your basic access and really what I need, and I'm actually a pretty big fan of it, although a lot of people may disagree with me. At times you do feel that you kind of want more out of it in terms of customization and just a less simplistic look to it, but I guess a lot of people out there do like a simpler look. There you can see is Google Now that you can easily access, and here are just all your cards of current running applications, but you do have to close them one by one. And we're also going to go and take a look at the notification panel or the pull down. You can see it is very clean and blank, but here you've got your quick toggle settings, and I'm actually a very big fan of it. It reminds me a lot of stock Android. Moving towards the settings, you have all your things that you should expect, mobile data, storage, stuff like that. Really no surprise here, but like I said, I find that Sense UI is rather clean, and it still gives you access to a lot of the things you may like. However, it isn't as confusing or busy as opposed to any other skin coming from other companies. Taking a quick look at the camera app, I will be going into more detail of that when we compare the cameras of these phones. There you can see, I'm just going to give you guys a quick peek at the camera app. I will go into more detail of this when we compare the cameras later on in this video, and also the default browser, which is the HTC One on the M7 and Google Chrome on the M8. So now let's take a look at the HTC Sense UI. Like I said, this does run Sense 6 UI as opposed to Sense 5 UI seen on the M7. However, they did say that there will be a future update coming to the M7. But for now, you can see is the all new revamped Blink feed that is now open to developers. So I think they really want to just do more with Blink feed and encourage people to use it, as it is located once again to the left of your home screen, but you can definitely turn it off if you choose not to use it. And once again, your app drawer does seem rather similar. Some small visual changes you'll see is on the top left corner. The pull down is just a little bit different. Makes it a little bit easier to access things, I think. And they have also taken out the clock from the app drawer. Again, to move stuff to your home screen and widgets, it is pretty much the same as we saw in Sense 5. Again, it is also very snappy, as you'd expect from a flagship phone nowadays, and the notification tab for the most part does seem pretty much the same. So now we're going to go into the settings of the M8, and once again, everything here looks very familiar. It does seem slightly cleaner and kind of a unified color of the green going throughout, but I definitely think it looks very cool, and so far I have been a huge fan of the M8. Taking a look at our recent applications, it still has the card layout, but now you can kill all your applications at once. Definitely good to have that. And there you can see I'm trying to find Google Now, but I guess it is on the home button now. As you know, the HTC M7 didn't have the menu button, it just has the home and the back button, but I'm actually a pretty big fan of the fact that the buttons are now located on screen. However, you can see there's just some blank space below the screen there where the HTC logo is, so I guess at first it does seem a little bit strange. Once again, a quick look at the camera app. You can see it is very clean, everything looks very nice, and there's also the dual camera support, as you may know. Another cool function that HTC calls motion launch is double tap to wake, double tap to sleep, pretty much the same as the LG knock function. You can also swipe up to go directly to your home screen and swipe from the left side to go directly to Blink feed, all while the device is in sleep. So that pretty much caps it off when it comes to the software of these devices. As many manufacturers were going for higher megapixels in their cameras, HTC decided to step back and go with the ultra pixel camera that we saw in the M7, and they have continued that on into the M8. For those who don't know, the ultra pixel allows you to take much better low light images thanks to 4 large pixels, much larger than the ones seen in cameras with higher megapixels, getting more light into each one. The primary camera on the HTC M8 is what HTC calls the ultra pixel sensor, while the camera above that is something we have never seen on a smartphone before, and it is used to store depth information for the dual camera function that allows you to focus in different spots after you take the image. The camera on the HTC M7 is also known as the ultra pixel camera, and on the spec sheet it seems to be identical to the one on the M8, so I'm curious to find out if they are actually the exact same one. It features a BSI 1/3 inch sensor, f2.0 aperture, a 28mm lens, and the dedicated HTC chip 2 for imaging. On the front, this is where you see a difference. HTC has gone to a 5 megapixel front-facing camera, so it definitely should take higher resolution images than other front-facing cameras out in the market right now. And ironically, in theory, the front-facing camera has a higher megapixel count than the rear-facing camera. On the front-facing camera of the M7, you've got a 2.1 megapixel camera, both capable of recording HD video. So now it's time to show you around the camera apps of these two phones and then move on to some side-by-side image and video tests. So let's start out with the HTC M7. You can see that the interface is rather simple. You've got your photo and video, you've got some of your settings there and the different photo capture mode, whether it is Zoe, night photo. You can see there's a switch to the front-facing camera. In general, it is rather easy to navigate, very simple. There really isn't too much to it, I would say, at least compared to something like the Samsung Galaxy S4. But in my opinion, I really don't mind the very simple interface. There's also the lock focus, camera options, white balance, and just some manual settings for your photos. So let's just move out of that and take a look at the gallery on this phone. So there you can see, just scroll around, rather simple there. But what I want to look at is the editing features that you could do after you take the image. As you know, the M8 really packs a punch in that category. So first you can see the share features, the highlight. But let's go into the edit features. It gives you some basic things such as the draw, rotate, crop, retouch the image. It actually still gives you quite a few functions, a lot of which you probably won't find yourself using that much. But let's move over to the M8. So when you take a look at the photo app on the M8, I definitely think it looks much better. You can see that the icons are nicely refined. There are also quite a few different features added to it. On the bottom, you've got your different modes for taking photos. I'm just going to leave it at auto for all the image tests. You can also set your ISO by yourself, your compensation, white balance, stuff like that, and you can even save custom presets for future use and have it saved on your menu. They also showed that in the event yesterday. On the top, you have your flash setting, and there's your menu, and I definitely think the rounded icons look really cool. There's just the video mode, the Zoe camera, and also the selfie mode, strangely named, didn't think they would name it that, and also the dual capture, kind of like what we saw on Samsung with their front and rear facing camera taking images at the same time, and also the fact that you can take the 360 images like we saw on the Nexus phones. By scrolling down on the screen, it will also switch you over to the front facing camera there. So let's just go ahead and move on to the gallery. So there you can see there's some editing settings you could do like we expected, and what I really wanted to play around with on the HTC M8, the duo camera. Unfortunately, it did tell me that it does not work with macro shots for some reason. You've got all your standard stuff such as your draw, rotate, crop, flip, like we saw on the M7. You can also add frames, effects, stuff like that. So tap the edit button and your dual camera feature should be under the effects menu. There's also some foregrounders, seasons, dimension plus, and touch up. A lot of that does utilize the camera, the secondary camera that stores the depth info. So let's just find an image here to test out the dual camera feature. Just tap the effects, and there is somewhere else that we would like to focus to, and it may not be as clear on video, but I definitely think it does work, at least in optimal conditions of the image. So I guess it is a pretty good function. I'm not sure if I'm going to be using it a lot, but I definitely can't wait to try out some more. So now we're going to take a look at some side-by-side images between the M8 and the M7. You can see that there isn't really a huge difference. The colors definitely look a little bit, I guess, better processed on the M8, just a little bit flatter than it is on the M7, slightly clearer, but you can see in these images there really isn't a huge difference. Again, you can see that the white balance on the M8 is just a little bit better. All these images you'll see were shot in the auto mode, self-focused by itself. So although in my opinion, I do feel that the M8 did do a slightly better job in general, it really isn't a huge difference, and it really comes down to personal preference actually as to which one you think looks better. So now comparing it in low light, as you know, HTC's ultra pixel camera is well known for its low light performance. In fact, this was a pitch black room, and I used the built-in flash and everything to take the images. You can see that the colors on the one taken on the M8 are just a little bit richer, things are a little bit clearer, and in general, there's more of a noticeable difference in this shooting mode, likely thanks to the dual flash. Now moving on to the video test, they both record in 1080p full HD. On the M8 you also have some HDR video mode, but right now we're just shooting in the standard mode, and again you could see that the colors just seem a little bit less washed out on the one on the M7, but it does seem a little bit flatter as well, so some of you may actually like the more vibrant and saturated look on the M7. So that really comes down to personal preference, but both of these were recorded on the same stand, recording the exact same thing, so it should give you a very good representation comparing the two cameras. So now moving on to the front-facing camera, the M8 has a 5 megapixel camera while the M7 has a 2.1 megapixel camera. You can see that the image on the M8 is just slightly sharper, at least at full size. I did have to crop it down to fit it in the frame. However, the M7 seems like the colors are just a little bit more vibrant. Like we saw with the images as well, it just seems as if the camera on the M8 is just a little bit of a flatter look to it. One of the most enjoyed or talked about features on the HTC Ones are the boom sound speakers. As you know, last year, HTC came out with the boom sound speakers in the M7, and all the consumers absolutely loved them because they were front facing and also by far the best speakers you will ever listen to on a smartphone, at least to date now. On the M7 you had the Beats audio, however on the M8 you do not anymore. It doesn't really make a difference whatsoever. In fact, I would say that it is pretty much only branding. Yes, there is a mode that you could turn on and off on the M7, but if you compare the audio, which I will do next, between the M8 and the M7, you will notice that it is much better, clearer, and 20% louder. Perhaps one of the most important things about a phone is the battery, because I guess you could have as much power as you need, but if you don't have anything to power it, then it is virtually useless. The battery has been improved slightly on the M8 to 2600 mAh as opposed to 2300 mAh in the M7, and although 300 mAh isn't really that much at all, there are some software optimizations that come in that will pretty much maximize the battery life on the M8. One being the extreme power saving mode, which HTC did show off in their event, allowing you to absolutely maximize your battery life on the M8 at critical times. Although not available at launch, the M8 will also have support of Quick Charge 2.0, and for reference, it will charge 0 to 100 in just 96 minutes as opposed to a regular 270, a lot reminiscent of its fellow Taiwanese company Oppo. I didn't find battery to be a problem with the M7, however they have improved it with the M8 definitely. I have been using these phones for pretty much all morning trying to record this video for you guys, and I definitely noticed that the battery on the M7 has gone down faster than it did on the M8. However, I will have to do some more extensive testing to bring you my full thoughts of that. The last category we're going to look at is the benchmarks. I didn't want to bore a lot of you guys, so I decided to leave this to the very end, as quite a few people out there simply don't care about the benchmark scores, but I'm doing it to show you the raw potential of the hardware built into the M8 and compare it to the M7. So you can see here there's actually a significant difference in the benchmark score between the M7 and the M8, going from 578 to 922 on the single core score and 1665 to 2552 on the multi-core score. This is likely thanks to the Snapdragon 600 processor clocked in at 1.7 GHz on the M7 to the Snapdragon 801 processor clocked in at 2.3 GHz on the M8. Moving on to the Antutu-X benchmark, you've got a 26,186 on an M7 and an extremely close 28,774 on the M8. However, you did hear me mention in my benchmark test that it is likely that there will be some updates coming to the app to be able to better analyze the hardware in the M8, like we did see with the Geekbench app when the iPhone 5S first came out. And the reason I have to believe that is not only because the score is extremely close for much upgraded hardware, but also the fact that it is referred to as the HTC 6525 LVW at the moment. When it comes to the quadrant standard benchmark though, it does show significant improvement from the M7 to the M8, scoring in at 25,155, while the M7 scored 12,162. You can also see there that they haven't updated their database in a while. However, in just a couple years, you can just see how much phones have improved in their raw power. So now we're going to take a look at the graphics handling of both of these phones. This will come in handy when you're playing graphic intensive games. However, I will say that the M7 handles even the most graphic intensive games flawlessly right now. So it really just shows that there is quite a bit of potential for more graphic intensive apps to come up. As you can see here, the M8 nearly doubled its predecessor, the M7, with a score of 20,856 compared to a 10,592. However, I did say that in real life, you really will not notice 2 times improvement in the graphics handling. Last but not least, we're just going to run a JavaScript browser test called SunSpider, and we actually ran this both on Chrome. As you know, on the M7, the default browsing application was by HTC, and on the M8, it was on Chrome. But to keep things fair, I ran Chrome on both of them, and you can see it goes from 851 to a 1481 on the M7. The lower the score, the better. So now it's time to give you my final verdict, and in this type of comparison, it is expected that the successor will do better, if not significantly better, than the predecessor, but in this case, the HTC M7 is still a great performer. I did see many improvements in each category of the M8, aside from the meager improvement in the camera category. However, in terms of the speed, the hardware, the speakers, and the overall design of the device, I definitely think it is actually a pretty worthy upgrade towards the M8 if you do have the M7. And although I wouldn't say it is hands down you should go and upgrade your M7 over to the M8, HTC Sense 6 will be coming to the M7, so you should see some features at least move over to that. But if you're a fan of some of the key features and improvements made to the M8, I can totally see why you would want to upgrade to it. But aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and be sure to leave a like, as I did spend tons of time on this video and I definitely appreciate that. And also leave a comment below on whether you're an M7 user and if you're happy with it or not, and if you do plan on upgrading to the M8. I'll see you all in the next video.